That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, it's still a good ways away. Alabama, Oklahoma, part two. Um, it, I don't even really know what to say about it. This is an early preview. We're going to be diving into the weeds a lot more next week, the X's and O's and everything. But just I wanted to start getting some early thoughts, and it's like I told you before we hopped on here. I was honest, and I was like, the closer we get, it's not that I feel bad about it, but it's one of those things where I originally felt pretty good, and then as you start actually looking at it, you're like, man, there is a lot that favors Oklahoma. The fact that this is in Norman, the fact that you're potentially getting R. Mason Thomas back. Now, Alabama's getting back a bunch of guys as well. We're expecting them to, so that offsets in a lot of ways. But then, things like special teams and defense, like I would give, especially with it being in Norman, I would give Oklahoma's defense an edge in this football game. I'd give Oklahoma's special teams a massive edge in this game. That makes me nervous. But at the same time, as you pointed out, there's reasons for concern. There's reasons for optimism. So we're here to talk a little bit about both. So I want to start with, you just give me your initial thoughts. Give me, reasons for optimism, reasons for concern, and we'll kind of just take it from there.
Yeah, I mentioned some of this off air to Clint. I might as well share it with you guys. Might as well. Uh, if you play the same game you played against Georgia on offense, I'm saying the defense played well enough to win the game in Atlanta. I know that might be hard for some to believe. I'm sure of it. I mean, defense held Georgia to less than 300 yards and played well enough to win. It would have been nice if they could force a turnover, but if you get that same performance from the offense and defense as you got in Atlanta, when you go to Oklahoma, Alabama's going to lose. There's no question that same offense won't be good enough against Oklahoma because Oklahoma's defense is every bit as good as Georgia's. As a matter of fact, it might even be a little bit better. I mean, just a hair better. It won't be a lot better because you're not going to get too much better than Kirby's defense. But the offense can't show up with no bullets to fire. I mean, then that's ultimately what the issue is right now on offense. They can't run the ball. And then, the passing game has just not worked the last couple of games like it was early in the year. And you're just sort of not having enough weapons. Now, that's my concern is that you're only going to be able to muster about 7 points like you did against Georgia, and that won't be enough. And in fact, if the offense is that bad again and special teams doesn't help us flip the field like it failed to against Georgia, and boy, Oklahoma's good on special teams, you're looking at your offense and special teams helping them out, on offense. Because Oklahoma, hey, look, all things equal, if both teams start every drive from their own 25-yard line, they're going to have just as much trouble scoring against Alabama as Alabama will have against them. I mean, it will be very difficult for either team to drive the ball 75 yards or 80 yards or even 70 yards to score against the other. That's the pessimistic part. Here's the optimistic part. I don't think Alabama will be the same team. I think, first of all, the bye week. This was a desperately needed bye week for Alabama. They desperately needed a week not to get beat up, to rest, to do the academic work. I think they got finals going on. That's actually given them a break. And they desperately needed that bye week. That's number one. I think the bye week and making the playoff will recharge them. Number two, you're actually getting people back. None of this is official, of course, so we're not here to break that sort of news. We'll let Kalen DeBoer do that when it's time. But I'm very optimistic, I'll say, that Jam Miller will be back. That will make a big difference, even in pass protection. But that'll make a big difference. Josh Cuevas will be back. I think that's huge. Cuevas had an 80-yard game against Oklahoma the first time around. Cuevas being back, huge. Germ, healthier. Ryan, healthier. Ty, healthier. Parker Brailsford, healthier. Cam Dewberry, back. I mean, that in and of itself gets me excited. I'm getting excited just talking about, well, that's a litany of players. And by the way, I've heard Proctor's beat up, Forme's beat up, and Michael Carroll's beat up, all rested from the bye week and ready to go. I don't think it will be the same team that we saw against Georgia. I think it'll be a little more similar. I'm not going to sit here and promise you guys, oh, this will be the best offense you've seen from Alabama all year long. This is going to be some sort of revelation on. No. I think my hope and my projection is that it will look a little bit more like when Alabama played Oklahoma the first time. And I know they lost that game. I know they did. And I know they, quote, only scored 21. But they racked up over 400 yards of offense and scored 21 points. I think if you do that again and turn over the ball just once and not 3 times, they win this game. And I think that's all you need. But it's still a lot to ask based on what we saw from Alabama last time. But I do think that they can muster up a game that will look offensively like the last time they played Oklahoma. Let's just cut out so many of the errors.
Quick question. Do you think that they have embraced the defensive first identity? And what I mean by that is I feel like in this game, the offense has got to accept they have to move the football however they can move the football. Now, you're right. They did have a lot of yardage success. Ty Simpson had 325 roughly passing yards. He had 1 touchdown, 1 interception. You have to avoid the turnovers on special teams and on offense. You have to. You also have to embrace, like, this feels like one of those games. I feel like Oklahoma has more so embraced that they are very limited offensively, and they are willing to rely on their defense and their special teams to carry them through football games. They kind of accept it, they expect it, and it's created a little bit better of not a product necessarily, but I think that it's almost like Alabama is still every week to an extent still trying to be like an offensive first identity. Now they know they have a really good defense. I'm not saying they ignore that side of the football, but what I'm saying is like, do you think that they have been leaning into it to the extent that like an Oklahoma has?
Probably not. Probably not. And this is why. I mean, my answer off the cuff, and I hate being negative about it, but probably not. And this is why Venables is a defensive guy. I mean, I don't know if this is the way Venables wants to do it. I think he'd like to be better on offense, and I think that's why he went and got Mateer and Arbuckle. I think he'd like to be better on offense, but I think Venables is comfortable winning games like this because he is so defense first guy. The fact of the matter is, DeBoer and Grubb, I kind of consider them hand in hand, especially when it comes to talking about the offense. DeBoer is an offensive guy. I think him and Grubb are probably to some extent frustrated over what's happening right now. And I don't know if they're going to completely embrace the idea that they can just win the game on defense and special teams and just play complementary football and offense and realize that, hey, every series that ends with a kick is probably good news for us. I don't think that they will embrace it just because of who they are and what they are. And it may hurt us a little bit here. I think one remarkable thing we can say after 2 years of the Kalen DeBoer experience is a huge shout out to Kane Womack, who has built a top 10 defense 2 years in a row. I think Alabama is elite on defense. I think they played that way even against Georgia. And the fact of the matter is, DeBoer's defenses at Washington weren't good. This Alabama defense is extremely good. And DeBoer is sort of winning at Alabama, and he is winning. He's winning because the defense is really good. If there's been a struggle, it's been offensively. And offense is why you hired this guy. He came in because he is an offensive guy, and he's got Ryan Grubb, of Seattle Seahawks fame by his side. Again, so I don't know that they'll embrace it. And overall, you could say the offense has been disappointing. Now, once you start picking nits, we can talk about the injuries, which are crazy. And I want to talk about the schedule a little bit, which, of course, concludes here with Oklahoma, or it does at the moment. But who we're playing down the stretch. I mean, I heard GMAC talk about it this morning on Jocks. Who we're playing down the stretch isn't talked about enough. I know it's, quote, all about us. But who else is finishing the season playing LSU's defense, Oklahoma's defense, Auburn's defense, and Georgia's defense? I mean, who else is doing that? It's certainly not Notre Dame. I know that they're saying They have one of the greatest runs in college football history. Literally a quote from their AD today. They hadn't played a seasons like what Alabama's played like in this final month, and especially in terms of the defenses that you're playing against. Blake Baker, Brent Venables, DJ Durkin, Glenn Schumann. These are the best defensive minds in the sport with quality dudes out there, and we got to do that every week. No wonder the offense is so beat up.
That is an excellent point. I mean, when you look, and I mean LSU, they held LSU's team to 17 points. So LSU's got a good defense. Obviously, against Western Kentucky, it was terrible all the way around, but the defense allowed 10 points. So not good against Western Kentucky necessarily, but not terrible. Arkansas did put up 22. Alabama put up 20. It's been really since Texas A&M that they started the season extremely well. They had a rough, 2-game stretch there.
And that's when they fired Brian Kelly.
Correct. Good point. And since then, they've actually done quite well on defense, like allowing points. And granted, against Oklahoma, that's against a very limited offense, even if it's in Norman. This is one of the things that make you encouraged if you're an Alabama fan, because they went into Norman and they really should have won that football game. Alabama should have beat Oklahoma this year. I truly believe that. Now, granted, here's the thing. This wasn't, and I heard somebody point this out, and they're 100% correct. The turnovers that happened against Oklahoma were not fluky, crazy, out of nowhere turnovers. They were Oklahoma making plays, getting the football out, baiting the quarterback into making a throw. So you can't say, just don't do the fluky stuff. Like, that won't happen again. But I still say losing a turnover battle 3-0 is a huge outlier. And Alabama, now granted, you're now going to Norman, and that is a massive difference, especially with this offense. This is why I say I just wonder if they've leaned into the defensive first identity. It's not committing to the run. Like, that's the most complimentary thing that you can do to help your defense. Really ball control in any way, because earlier in the season, they were playing ball control. And it's not like they're over here chunking the football down the field. In fact, Ty Simpson in his last 2 games against Georgia and Auburn, he's 0 for 8 on pass attempts of 20 yards or more. But it's more so of just saying we need to do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. If that is throwing the football 55 times because we cannot run it, being more creative in what you're calling, getting the football in your playmakers' hands, not being predictable, though. Like, I do think there's something as far as, like, when Jaron Bernard is lined up in the backfield, very rarely is he not getting the football in some form or fashion. They ran, they'll use him out of the backfield. They'll hand him the football. It's just a lot of times when he's back there, he's being utilized. It's, maybe putting him back there, letting him command some attention, and then putting the football in someone else's hands. It's doing more of that type of thing. It's just doing whatever you can. Embrace the fact that you're not going to be this. You're not going out there and scoring 35 points. You're not going out there and scoring probably 30 points. You might not even reach 25 points. But go out there and do what the approach shouldn't. I'm not saying, offense just goes out there with zero expectations. They're not trying to score. You're doing whatever you can. But there needs to be like this. If I'm Kane Womack, and really if I'm Kalen DeBoer, because Grubb's worried about the offense and only the offense. Kalen DeBoer's worried about everything to an extent. Kane Womack's worried about the defense. You're telling the defense, this game is on us. Right now, we're not getting it from the offense. We're not getting it from the special teams. They're going to both do whatever they can to try to help us win. But this is on us. We've got to force some turnovers. We've got to make John Mateer uncomfortable. We've got to continue to stop their run game. They did a good job in the first matchup of stopping Oklahoma's run game. They have been starting to pick things up a little bit. And I'd be curious to know how they looked against. I don't think they did particularly well running the football against Oklahoma either. Yeah, they averaged 2.7 yards, against LSU. They averaged 2.7 yards per carry. Torrey Blaylock averaged 3.8 yards per carry. Mateer 3.4. Xavier Robinson 1.5. So they struggled to run the football there. And Mateer had 3 interceptions against LSU.
If that happens against Alabama right now, I'll tell you right here, right now, Alabama wins the game.
I would agree with that. I would fully agree with that. And he will give them to you. Now, their approach is probably going to be like LSU's offense is actually pretty limited too. Like this game could end up looking very similar, is my point.
Yeah,
Because like Michael Van Buren, he went 14 to 25 for 96 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He averaged 3.8 yards per a pass attempt. On defense, they averaged 2.9 yards per carry. Durham did average 7 yards a carry. Van Buren averaged 6.6. So a lot of their, Jawan Johnson averaged -5, 3 carries for -15 yards. So it's things like that that caused that average to come down. As far as Van Buren and Durham, they actually did a pretty decent job, but that's only 11 combined attempts. But I can see Alabama won. I hope Ty Simpson is a lot closer to 100% because I feel like you've got to lean into his legs. You've got to lean into running the football as far as, trying to run the football. They've already been trying that. My point is that if you can have the success that you did in the first matchup, like with Daniel Hill and such, then you continue to try to do that. I think that's very complimentary. And I think that ability really helped Ty Simpson reach 300 plus yards passing and have some of the success that he did through the air. But if you can't run the football, I don't think that should be the identity. It almost felt like going into the Georgia game, that was like a must, right? Like it felt like that because the first 4 plays, offensive plays of the game were runs. And then they just figured out real quick, okay, we're not going to be able to run the football against Georgia. Now let's just abandon the run. Now, part of that's game script and Georgia getting up by 14 really early and then eventually getting up by 21 and you're playing from behind. You got to avoid that at all costs. This team is, you go down multiple scores and Alabama is in massive trouble. But it has felt like whether it be Missouri, whether it be LSU, as long as you don't do things that you don't hand their defense opportunities to be the ones to make the big plays, this team is very gettable. So I still think Alabama has a chance to win. They've got to avoid turnovers on offense. And in my opinion, you've got to probably generate at least 1 or 2 bare minimum on defense.
A couple things. I'll start positive first time and then end negative about the run game. Here's some positive. In terms of how the season ended against Oklahoma, we talked here on the show, and I really felt like, it wasn't a revelation. It wasn't a new team, but I felt like they ran the ball okay against Oklahoma, considering who you're going up against. They gave up no negative run plays. You never lost yardage on a run play against Oklahoma. That's huge progress considering who you're playing. I believe Daniel Hill had something like 60 yards on 15 carries, and he actually looked pretty good. There was even talk, okay, Daniel Hill may have won the RB1 job. He looked that good against that level of defense, and you started to have at least a flicker of hope for the Alabama run game. Then Eastern Illinois happens, and it doesn't really matter what happens versus them because they're just not an SEC football team. But then against Auburn, what happens? They don't run the ball great, but who looks pretty good? Jam Miller. Jam Miller looked better early in that Auburn game than he had since September before the concussion. He really did. He looked sharp. It was so unfortunate to see him go down because it was like, oh, just when we're getting Jam Miller back, now he's lost again. Point being, and then against Georgia, you don't have Jam. Daniel's banged up. The passing game, the whole thing against Georgia, I almost wish we could just kind of hit delete and flush that. Point being, when the season ended, you got a pretty good game from Daniel Hill. You got a real good showing from Jam. Now they're both healthier, and you're going to Norman. I think maybe I'm holding on to that there might be some hope of, you don't have to run for 200 yards, but just run it enough to make Oklahoma take it serious that, hey, mate, they're going to run the ball some here, and we have to defend that. And I think it would be just so hugely beneficial. Now, here's all the negativity part, and that's just that the run game's been so. Do you know, Clint, it's off the top of my head, pretty sure it's true, second longest, I know the longest run from scrimmage all year by a running back, A.K. Deere, 58 yards, I think, against Louisiana Monroe.
Mop-up duty.
Yes. The second longest run from a running back all year, Daniel Hill with a 24-yard run.
28.
That's the second longest run.
And it was against Oklahoma, by the way.
Nice. But goodness gracious.
I mean,
that's terrible. That's just terrible. No, there's no way anyone else in the SEC has that as their second longest run from scrimmage by a running back. Maybe LSU, who I think is the only team in the league that runs it worse than Alabama. You know, you got to fix that in the offseason. You're not going to fix it before Oklahoma. The run game at Alabama is just sort of broken. But I still think you can cobble something together with a healthier Jam, a healthier Daniel Hill, a healthier offensive line, and a healthier commitment to it. Like Clint said, they come out against Georgia trying to run the ball. Didn't really work, but they quit on it too quickly. You just didn't have enough carries for the backs in this game. I mean, I think there was only like 7 or 9 between Daniel Hill and AK Deer. Now, AK Deer was a freshman on the biggest stage. There was a pretty infamous bust he had in that game that caused a real bad negative play. Daniel Hill was playing gimpy per Kalen DeBoer, probably why he didn't get a lot of carries, but you got to make a bigger commitment to it in Oklahoma.
You have to. You absolutely have to. And I was actually just confirming exactly what you were talking about. I mean, long rushing plays in the SEC, 10 plus, Alabama's 15th in the SEC with 39, 20 plus, they're tied for 11th with 11, 30 plus, they're 15th, tied for 15, tied with Florida for 15th. They've had 130 plus yard rushing play all year. So that confirms exactly what you're talking about. And really,
Florida is the other team, huh?
And Florida is the other team. LSU.
That's just surprising because Jaden Baugh is such a talented kid, but goes to show none of this stuff's too easy.
Yeah. I mean, it's really not. And granted, they're sitting there with 48 plays of 10 plus yards, which is not great, but that's 11th in the SEC compared to Alabama sitting at 15th with 39. So they have about 9 more 10 plus yard. But yeah, they're sitting in the same range. And then, of course, I mean, and when you talk about Daniel Hill's 28-yard game, which is one of only, 11 plays that Alabama has had for 20-plus yard gains on the ground.
And some of those could be, that's not running back only, right? I mean, some of
correct.
those could
That's
be
Ty Simpson.
Germ, Ryan.
Correct.
Lotsier.
There's very few that have been from the running backs. That is 100% accurate. And so, I mean, when you think about it, Daniel Hill actually averaged 2.3 yards per carry against Oklahoma if you take away that 28-yard gain. So we talk about 4 yards, and that's great. And that 28-yard play that's great. And if you can get another one of those, once again, that's great. But considering Jam Miller averaged 3 yards per attempt against him, and Daniel Hill outside of that one explosive averaged 2.3, I mean, it's one of those things where, now granted, that was to be expected. They actually performed better. Like, it was one of those things where I thought it was constantly going to be like 1.5, 2 yards a carry type of situation. So them getting 3 from Jam Miller, even if they average 3 yards a carry against them in Norman, I don't think that will be terrible, to be honest. That will probably be about what I would expect. If they get anything more than 3 yards carry, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, it's like, all that's gravy. I would probably put the number around 3. It's hard to average under 3 yards carry, to be honest. But Alabama has found a way to do it. I mean, negative 3 yards. But, at the same time, maybe Jam being back, if he can be back, he'll start to recapture. It is so unfortunate because he was hitting those waves at 2 different moments in the season, and injuries just slapped him right back down there. And against Vanderbilt and Missouri, that was the player that the coaching staff was expecting this season in the offseason. Like, that's who he was predicted to be based off of how he was performing. What you saw against Auburn, that was the player, him starting to recapture that form. He's not the best running back in the SEC, but that is a running back that you can win with. Daniel Hill has had some moments, but I still think Jam Miller, from an explosive standpoint, him at his best is better than Daniel Hill at his best.
I agree.
So it's tough right now. Like, we learned AK Deer out of necessity. He got snaps against Georgia. Didn't look great. Didn't look terrible. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, outside of some blown, at least one blown assignment, I mean, he looked like everybody else, which kind of tells you, okay, I mean, he didn't look terrible. That's good. But just this run game has been abysmal. And when you're looking at Oklahoma's defense and what they did, Okay, stop the run effectively enough, put them in the uncomfortable longer down and distances, the second longs, which they're throwing the football, third and longs, they're throwing the football, and then just pressure. Just how you send it, you overwhelm, you win the numbers game. What if they don't have? I understand that, like, where I think Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer messed up with this offense. They thought the offensive line was going to be a lot better. They thought the run game was going to be a lot better. They thought, based off of that, Ty's going to have a lot of, it's kind of like I talked about in the offseason. You got a good offensive line. You got a good running game, not going to be spectacular, but solid, amazing weapons in the passing game. Like, Ty is set up for success because we also thought they're going to have a defense that was going to be good, very opportunistic, force fumbles, force turnovers in general, put Ty Simpson in a position kind of like Georgia did for Gunnar Stockton this past weekend, where you force some turnovers, you block a punt, interception, return game, all those things, and just put him in a position where it takes a lot of pressure off of him. I think the coaching staff thought they were getting that. And so they thought the longer developing stuff, the deeper drops, take a little bit of time. They thought they'd be able to do that at a much higher, much more successful rate. They haven't. It's hard to just switch up everything you're doing mid-season or late in the season or whatever. But you now have a couple of weeks. I'm not saying go Oklahoma against Alabama in 2024, where they just all of a sudden they're doing what Vanderbilt was doing in a lot of instances, and it's quarterback run all the way. Nothing that has to be that drastic. But I do think you need to throw a wrinkle at Oklahoma that is somewhat similar to that they are like, whoa, I didn't see that coming at all, because you've got to approach this game of, hey, our defense is going to probably have to win this for us, but we've got to do whatever we can to give them all the help we can give. Because if we can get a lead, if Alabama can get up 10 points somehow, Alabama's in great shape with their defense going against that offense. Great shape. I will feel wonderful about that. Throw the freaking kitchen sink at that defense early and just hope you get something that sticks. Do some trick. I understand everybody hates the trickery. Do whatever you got to do. I don't care what the approach is. I'll leave that up to you. But they've got to do something, Jimmy, to when maybe that's a defensive score early that puts Oklahoma in the hole. I don't know, but they've got to figure out a way to get up early in this football game and really take control and put a lot of pressure on John Mateer and that Oklahoma offense.
Kalen DeBoer has said himself, about what went wrong in the Oklahoma game in 2024. He's talked about the start. We didn't start well. We felt like if we started well, things would go well, but they didn't. In fact, they got behind, not super early, because the defense actually, they hung in there for a while. It wasn't like they blew Alabama out in every facet. It was really just an implosion of Alabama's offense. But Kalen DeBoer cited specifically not getting off to a good start. Alabama's got to find a way to get to a better start. And yeah, you're not going to pull a Jackson Arnold there. I don't think you're going to do an RPO with Ty's health and run an RPO system, but you do have to do something different. Everybody around the country talks about Brent Venables stealing signs. That's a big thing when you play Oklahoma, because coaches, they talk about this stuff, and he sort of has a reputation, not as doing anything against the rules. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is he's apparently, him and his staff work on this and are very good at stealing signs. And here's a theory I have. I think what they're also really good at is film study. They know you really, really, really well. And based on formation and tendency and pre-snap movement, they sort of know what you're running based on that. And I think a lot of people interpret that as they've got our signs. No, actually, they know what you're going to do because you have tells. And they know what those tells are. So how do you combat that? No different than changing signals. No different. You change your patterns. You change your tendencies. If this is what you've done all year, then do something a little different. It can be this simple of a fix. And boy, this might really help. And maybe going into the game, Ryan Grubb, if you're listening, feel free to use this idea and claim it as your own. Feel free. I know this isn't, breaking the atom here. Here's my idea. Run when they think you're going to throw it, and throw it when they think you're going to run it. That's all. That's it. That's the change. That's the change. Nothing. No dramatic. No magic. No Jackson Arnold. All of a sudden is an RPO wishbone quarterback against Alabama. It's not that. It's just, hey, it's on 1st and 10. If you've thrown it on 1st and 10, 70% of the time, we're going to run it 70% of the time. If you run the ball on 2nd and 6, 80% of the time all year, this time you're going to throw it on. I would do the opposite of what every tendency you have to do and get rid of the tells and get rid of the tendencies. And then I think magically you'll believe, hey, this was a game they didn't have our signs. Well, I really think something that simple could be huge in the game. But you have to be committed to it. And you have to run the ball when it doesn't work and run it again when it doesn't work and run it again when it doesn't work. You can't just go into the game thinking we're going to throw the ball 46 times and put it all on Ty Simpson and what's left of him physically. You just can't do it. Even if you're running the ball and it's not working, at least that's helping Ty to some extent. Also, we can't have Ty beat up like he was the first time they played Oklahoma. They got to him a lot. They got to him kind of easily. They're very good at the tackles for loss and the disruption at the line of scrimmage. Somehow, some way, you've got to keep Ty physically able to perform for 60 minutes in the game.
You do. And first of all, break tendencies. I love that from you. Break tendencies. If you got to get the defensive staff, you got to get Kane Womack in there during this week that you're not playing and say, how would you attack us? What are the tendencies that you guys are finding with our offense? You've got to, because sometimes it's like a fresh eye, like your own offensive staff looking at it, you're not noticing. Like people were pointing out, you can tell when Geno Vandermark's pulling, and there's certain tells that Georgia had in that football game. But it's also tendencies. Like and Brooks Austin brought this up, and I completely agree with him. And we talked about that on this show, actually, as far as instead of like matching personnel, play the coach, play the tendencies and what they do. Oklahoma did that extremely well. I think Auburn did that well, and Georgia did that extremely well. And so if you are Ryan Grubb in this offensive staff, you've got to take accountability for that and say, get away from the tendencies. If they're anticipating, doesn't matter what their personnel is on the field, understand how they're probably going to be playing you based off of your own tendencies and be ready to counter. And there were opportunities to do that against Georgia. They ran some 3 high safety looks. They had 6 men in the box, and Alabama had 5 offensive linemen, an attached tight end. You had 6 for 6, and you should have been running the football, and yet they were still throwing it. And granted, I'm fairly certain. The problem with watching the All-22 is sometimes I don't pay attention to the down and, or I know it was 2nd and 8 is the one that I'm thinking of. I don't always pay attention. Like I'm like 90% sure it was not before the half or something like that, where you're having to throw the football. It was in the middle of the game, probably early 2nd quarter, maybe, if I had to guess based off of where it was, where I remember it. You have to break some of those tendencies. And if they give you numbers in the box, run the football. Even though you haven't been overly successful at it, if you can hit them with some play. Here's the thing. This, in some ways, and maybe you can agree with me or disagree, based off of Oklahoma's defense and how good it is it historically good? No. But in some ways, this game kind of feels similar, at least with the defense versus Alabama's offense, to the 2021 SEC championship. Alabama was coming off of that Iron Bowl where they looked atrocious. It wasn't until the very end of the game, couldn't block anybody. Historically good Georgia defense. Now you're going to Atlanta to play Georgia. That's going to be tough. That team is hungry. They hadn't won a national championship yet, so that hunger was there, that want to, and just nobody was really giving Alabama a chance, mostly because it's looking at that defensive front versus Alabama's offensive line and saying there's no way they're running the football. They got injuries at running back. Brian Robinson is even playing. It's going to be like a kind of a Trey Sanders who was never right after his injury. He's probably going to have to be the lead back. He actually might have, he did play. He had 6 carries for 21 yards. But once again, like Brian Robinson, and I've talked about this before, he didn't do anything crazy. He averaged 3.4 yards per carry. Trey Sanders averaged 3.5 yards per carry. but the run game was more successful against Georgia's defense than anybody thought it was going to be. Now, granted, you had a future number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young, who threw for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions in that game. So I'm not saying that, but that's how you win. That's how you score 41 points against that team. We're not asking nobody to score 41.
Yeah.
We're asking, it is possible
I
that
had a buddy today said, Jimmy, is there any way they can get us 30 this game? Is there any way they can get 30? And I'm like, I went back and looked. I'm like, do you realize Oklahoma's only given up 30 once
who was
all
that
year?
too? Do you remember?
Ole Miss.
Ole
Ole
Miss,
Miss
yeah.
at home. The Ole Miss game at home. They gave up 30 once all year. So you're like, can this Alabama team score 30? When basically no one else is. That feels like a really big ask. The good news is I don't think they need 30, but back to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I mean, I don't think they're getting there. I mean, I really don't. If they do, that's great. My guess would be a defensive score is what helped them get there, which has happened. Like, I guess against Tennessee, they scored 37, but 2 of that was a safety too, right?
That was a safety, and then of course Xavier Brown had the
pick six.
The pick six that should have been worth more points because it was 99 yards.
Yeah.
Like in fantasy football, when your kicker kicks a 50-yard field goal, you get 4 points and not 3. that should be what a 99-yard pick six. You should get like more than 6.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, that the offense put up 28 in that game, didn't get to 30. So expecting 30 out of nowhere, nah, I wouldn't. Now, granted, like I said, I do think having some time, because we also got to remember they had played that really tough stretch and they had won a bunch of games. Then you struggle against South Carolina and Columbia, good pass rush. I don't think Alabama going into that bye week was like overly concerned. Like, I think they were like, we are at the end of a really tough stretch here. Didn't look great, but I mean, we're okay. We're going to be okay. We'll try to focus on running the football better post bye week. Like, they worked on things, but there was no panic. This is the first time that they have had a bye week where, because like, even like based off of what you had shown both against Louisiana Monroe and against Wisconsin, it's like, okay, we're moving in the right direction. Still got to prepare for Georgia, got to be ready and have a great game plan. But I think they felt better. Right now, I think there is like we've got to switch some things up. I think there's going to be a lot more, and it's not going to be we're going to commit to running the football. I think it's kind of accepting the fact that you're going to be limited running the football, and how do we compensate for that? How do we get Ty back on track? How do we get these wide receivers? What do we need to do to help these weapons that are hopefully going to be back and hopefully be 100% healthy or close to it? How do we put them in a position to be successful? I don't feel like Ryan Grubb has put his guys in a position to be overly successful, especially as of late. That's probably been, Ty, considering everything that's going wrong around him, that's, you're concerned about his play, but it's a lot more understandable. Ryan Grubb, I understand that you feel very limited with the injuries and the limitations that you already had, but you're not like, it's your job to say, okay, how do we get this stuff fixed? Some of it's just going to have to wait to the off season. That's just the bottom line. But there are things that you can do to help out. And when you're motioning into, bunch, or you're condensing the formation and then you're running the football instead of spreading teams out and trying to run that way, it's like they're just doing things that are putting themselves in not great situations, and they've got to get that fixed. At least that side of it fixed.
Well, Ty, and speaking of getting fixed, to me, the end result here is going to be all about the health. If, in our breakdown of the Oklahoma game, the Monday after Oklahoma, let's say Alabama ends up on the losing end. If I'm miserably just sitting here telling you guys, well, Ty's hurt, Jam's hurt, Daniel Hill's hurt, Germ's hurt, Ryan's hurt, Cuevas is hurt, Parker's hurt. All that's true. All that is true today. If it's still true the Saturday you play Oklahoma, it's probably not going well. It's probably not going well. And, how many guys has Alabama, I mean, off the top of my head, how many guys have been lost for the season from this Alabama team? I know Jeremiah Beeman, Drake Kirkpatrick, though it's not injury related. But, I mean, who all's been lost for the year? I think it might just be Beeman, right? I mean,
Yeah, I don't
you
know
know,
if Kevin Riley's going to be back,
I'm not sure for Riley. That's a good one. I'm not sure Riley will be back. He
but
might be, but
but you're right.
he might be. But the point is, that's remarkably healthy. And I remember saying here on the show, and yeah, it's my fault if y'all want to kill me on Twitter for it. I mean, I've said, boy, look how healthy this team is. That's really good luck. I said that. I did say that out loud. And now look. Well, I think the trade-off to the injury gods, Clint, the trade-off that we made, like, please let us keep all our guys for the season and not lose anyone for the season. And the injury gods grant you that wish, and they say, okay, but your entire offensive lineup will be playing hurt. It's kind of like this trade-off. I guess you just can't get a year when you're not losing guys for the season and you're not getting guys so banged up it affects their ability to play well. But that's simply the case with Alabama. I think it happened all at the end, which makes sense because it's an accumulation of 12 or 13 games where it happens. And you played so many physical defenses at the end. We talked about it earlier in the show. LSU, Oklahoma, Auburn, who's very good defensively. What Auburn only gave up over 24 like one time all year. I mean, defensively, they're good on defense. Georgia, elite on defense. So is Oklahoma. That's how you finish all these physical defenses at the end of a 13 game season, 9 SEC games, a couple of Power 4 games thrown in there, Florida State, Wisconsin. Uh, just a real beat up football team. If what we're talking about Monday, Clint, Monday after Oklahoma is, I'm like, I would have liked to have seen us play Oklahoma with a healthy offense. Then we lost the game. But here's the good news. I do think most of those guys will be much better off after the bye week, treatment, and just the adrenaline of playing in a playoff game. I think you'll see a rejuvenated Alabama offense. Probably not what they were early in the year, but you don't have to be. In my opinion, you only have to be the Alabama team you were when you played Oklahoma about 4 or 5 weeks ago. You've only got to be that because that offense was good enough to win this game and beat Oklahoma minus the turnovers. You did a great job of pointing out, hey, it's not like Alabama just went out there and goofed and handed Oklahoma the ball. No, Oklahoma forced all 3 of those turnovers. They're going to be trying to force those turnovers again. You just have to be hyper vigilant about turnovers that, hey, it's a major goal of theirs. They're very good at it. So I'm feeling optimistic. I mean, we don't have to make a pick today. I'm not going to make a pick. I once again say, I think I said it on the show the other day here. I really feel like there's a race to just 23 points. I really feel 23 will win the game for either team. If Oklahoma gets to 23, I don't know that Alabama can catch them. If Alabama gets to 23, I'm going to feel pretty good about that offense. Not only scoring the 23 points, Clint, but playing complementary football in a way to where the defense sitting on the field for 60 minutes and Oklahoma has issues on offense like Alabama. I just feel 23 wins the game. And I think 23 is very doable. Alabama scored 21 the last time these two teams played. Oklahoma got to 23 last time. I don't think they'll do it again unless they get more help from Alabama and special teams included.
Yeah, first thing that I want to bring up, I still believe this offseason was too physical. I know that it's strange because a lot of people, like, it feels like Alabama in some ways has been soft, although they've been accused of being soft. So I think they beat themselves up a lot before the season. And then you get against Florida State and it's hot and it's humid and it's a much more physical game than you were anticipating. And then that beats you up a little bit. And then there's this added motivation. You're pissed off. You feel disrespected because everybody's doubting you. And so you're pushing yourself really hard and you're trying to prove yourself. And I think this has just been an exhausting, tiring season. These types of injuries, to me, like, if it's not like you're losing guys to ACLs and things like that, that's a lot of people want to put it on the strength and conditioning staff in those instances, but a lot of times, like, that's just unfortunate injury luck. Alabama's feels just, not only did you end up having that, but then you went on this run where you're going against it's the SEC. So it's a physical grind. Maybe the inexperience of this coaching staff dealing with the SEC grind actually ended up biting them because there's like, you can be hard on guys, you can push them, but from a physicality standpoint, you probably shouldn't be pushing them to the extent that you It's kind of like a couple of years ago when Nick Saban wanted to get back to having a bigger, more physical offensive line, and he just got everybody massive. And then we get into the season, we realize you got them too big. Like they're out of shape, they're massive, they're clunky, they can't move as well. And it's like, well, now you're screwed. Now you're in it. That was a bad move. Shouldn't have done that. It's kind of that way where you want them to be physically tough, but you've worn them down in the process. The body can only handle so much. I think that's ended up maybe playing a bigger part in this, and why everybody seems to be banged up. No, and everybody's going to be banged up regardless. I'm saying that Alabama's got a bunch of guys who are. It's not just being banged up too. It's not. It is like Parker Brailsford might as well be out. I mean, I'm speaking candidly because his injury has limited him that much where I don't think you're getting worse play from Joe Ionata. I really don't.
Or Geno Vandermark. Of course, Geno had to play a lot of left guard because Cam Dewberry was out, which is just so illustrative of Alabama's problems. I agree with you that while Parker Brailsford's a much better football player than Geno Vandermark, for being honest, I know you agree with that. Parker's a much better player. Parker in this condition is probably not an upgrade over what a healthy Geno Vandermark or relatively healthy Geno Vandermark can give you. Because I thought Geno actually played pretty well at center against Auburn. Now Auburn's not Georgia, even though Auburn's pretty good on defense. Gosh, with this challenge coming up, and I don't know if I'm saying this before I know whether you're going to agree with this or not. Me and you have watched Kalen DeBoer's team at Alabama practice. Me and you, as part of the media contingent, we've watched them practice numerous times, and we don't get to see a lot of practice, but we get to see some. I have been surprised based on what I expected and heard. They're coming from the West Coast. They're coming from the Pac-12. They're going to throw it all over the ball field. I've been surprised by my own eyes how physical practices are under DeBoer and Womack. I'm not like shocked, not walked out of there like, oh my gosh, they're killing each other. They'll never survive the season.
The Junction Boys.
It's not the Junction Boys. It's not that. But I have been surprised, and I want to use another word, impressed by how hard they practice and how physical they practice. And for those of you like, well, what do you compare to? I've seen every Alabama team practice, whether as a booster or as a member of the media, going all the way back really to Curry, Bill Curry. I've seen Alabama practice through every coach. I would not say that DeBoer's practices are less physical than other practices. Now, I do think offenses have changed over the years. The Stallings practices were pretty physical, but that's because they never really threw the ball, not even at practice. Right. So, yeah, that was maybe a whole step above. But for those who just think without knowing, because they've never been, that DeBoer's teams are soft and they don't practice hard, and that you've never been to practice, because that's just absolutely not the case. I think they practice pretty physical, and maybe you're right. Maybe there does need to be the discussion of whether it's too physical, especially into the season. There's an article today, I think a Wall Street Journal, about Kurt Cignetti in Indiana. He apparently doesn't like physical practices during the season at all. He's kind of practicing like an NFL team, which doesn't have a lot of physical practices throughout the week because they get so beat up on Sundays. The NFL does a lot of stuff in shorts all during the week leading up to games. Maybe the NFL's onto something because they play so many games. Maybe this is the future of college football, that, hey, it's time to back off these guys.
Well, I think there's times for it. And I don't know how physical the in-season practices are. I have no idea. But I know that based off of people that I talk to who are there regularly at practice, and then you hear, and what this is what I always love, is when you're hearing things yourself and then someone else that goes to it, someone like Josh Pate, who's actually able to attend a closed practice that we're not able to see, when they confirm it based off of what they see. And Josh Pate, I remember he said in the preseason, he said, these boys are hitting pretty much. Like, it was a very, very physical practice.
And he sees everybody practice all over the country. He ain't just going to Alabama's practice. He sees a lot of teams practice. Correct. So when he says that, he's comparing it to what he's seeing on other practice fields.
I think that, like, there was this, and I don't know if that's always been DeBoer. I'd have to talk to previous, people at Washington and stuff. But I don't know, or if that was just kind of an overcompensation of, we fell short of expectations in year one. People thought I was maybe a little bit too soft on these guys. That's kind of, let's get back to more of the old school. Let's put them through the meat grinder. Let's, lean into this. And then also it's like, hey, SEC is really physical, got to have physicality. We got to be a hard-nosed team. I don't know if it's Ryan Grubb, but I mean, Ryan Grubb was coming from the NFL where they really baby them in practice. I mean, and when you're on that level, you know how to run and hit, and you're physical and all that, so that like they don't have to practice like colleges really or high schools or anybody else. So it's a little bit different. But one of the things, speaking of injuries, that I wanted to also, yesterday I went on my huge rant about the injuries, and I stand by all of that. But I do want to clarify: Georgia whipped Alabama because of their ability to not only have their guys, their replacement players, having them ready for battle, doing a much better job with that, and doing things to help those players. And I used the example yesterday, center. What's a great way to help out your center? Take a lot of pressure where you're putting your offense in very manageable situations right out the gate. You're already in scoring position. And, it just, if you make him drive the length of the field, that Georgia offense drive the length of the field, and he's getting slammed by Tim Keenan over and over all the way down the field, do they have as much success, or does Tim Keenan win enough of those battles? But even in the red zone, like when you're already there, it's like we're guaranteed 3 points here pretty much. So, they took a lot of pressure early off of their replacement players, and being able to do that can really, really help. Alabama's was constantly like, not only were they having to rely on a lot of guys they typically don't, but also they're under a lot of pressure. Like, hey, you've got to get stops here. We got to get the football back, defense. And then offense, hey, we've got to start putting points on the board. We're down multiple scores. We've got to get this going. Like, it's a different mentality. It's pressure for everybody involved. And then the other team starts cutting it loose a little bit. They're having fun. They're up. We're in control. We're beating up on these guys. It's momentum. But at the end of the day, the reason that injuries do impact the outcome. So Alabama had a lot of injuries. Georgia had a lot of injuries, not as many as Alabama, but close enough where it's not necessarily that just, Georgia just does a better job of having the next man up ready, I guess is the way that I put it. That's what that proved to me, was that they did a much better job of managing their injuries. So some coaching staffs are better at that, right? But if you were to put all the healthy players on the field at the same time and both teams are 100% healthy, it is a different ball game completely. Not saying that Alabama's going to win it. I'm saying that some coaching staffs don't have their guys ready, their backups ready like they need to. And we even saw at times, the Alabama coaching staff in 2021 when they played Georgia again and they were down their top two receivers. Nick Saban did not have those replacement players ready to go to war and ready for what they were going to be getting, and it caused a way different outcome. That's what, when I say, if Jameson Williams and John Mechie are available, Alabama is certainly in that ball game, and it could have been a different outcome. That's what I'm saying. That still falls on Nick Saban. That's still them falling short, and that still falls on, you give Kirby Smart and Georgia credit for taking advantage of that. So I just didn't want people to think, I'm saying injuries are Georgia did a way better job of managing their injuries and having their guys ready than Alabama, which is a huge reason why Georgia whipped Alabama's ass up and down the field on Saturday. So I don't want to take anything away from Georgia. I just, I've never agreed with the whole, it wouldn't have mattered. No, if you put your star players on the field, it's probably going to matter. So wanted to clarify a little bit there. Jimmy, do you have anything else before we hop out of here, brother?
Nope. Great points about the injury thing. If we were all race fan, not race, like track and field fans instead of football, let's say that everyone tunes into our show every week because we're Usain Bolt. It's an Usain Bolt show about Usain Bolt, the best sprinter in the history of the world. And Usain pulls a hamstring. And then he's got a race on Saturday. And he races against the fastest guys in the world, and his hamstring's dinged up, and he loses. We're all going to be upset because he lost. But what exactly are we upset about? What did our guy do? I mean, are we like, the coach should have fixed the hamstring? Or that's just it. Some people would say that's just an excuse. Would anyone say that it's just an excuse? No, I mean, injuries are a fact of the game. And sometimes the injury situation can be so bad, it's very difficult to be competitive. I think Alabama was sort of at that doorstep with the offense. It was just difficult to be competitive against an elite team with Alabama's injury situation. And I don't understand those that say that's making an excuse. Now, I do agree that you've got to do a better job of having a next guy up mentality, and maybe AK Deer could have been more ready to play in the game. For instance, that's just one spot. Maybe Caleb Edwards and Marshall Pritchett could have been a little more ready to be competitive against Georgia. I do think it's fair to ask that of the coaching staff, but the injuries just really mounted up, and I'm going to feel really good about Oklahoma if next week, when we really break down the game, if we have a healthier football team. And I do believe, based on what I know, that we actually will.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I mean, it's just, I mean, when you, I don't know. I know we've hammered this topic to death. I'm sure people are pretty sick of it. I mean, and I can't blame people for feeling how they feel, but it's just, I'm most disappointed in the fact that I don't care. You're Alabama. That's, I guess, what I'm coming back to. Yes, I expect everything. I don't expect things to look great on offense with everybody back, because we've seen it and it hadn't been great.
Yeah.
It was better than you saw on Saturday.
And that's all it will take.
Yeah, exactly.
Better is all it will take.
Yeah, exactly. And it's when you saw it against Georgia, I'm not saying they're getting that on offense with all these cats back. Not at all. Because they're still a different team right now than they were against Georgia the first time. But I think, I mean, there's going to be guys that are ready for that moment a lot more prepared. But at the same time, once again, wasn't taking anything away from Georgia.
No.
Because
they might win the whole thing. I mean,
they're a really good football team, and I mean, they were willing to take the fight to Alabama, and Alabama was willing to lay down and take it.
How about this stat real quickly? Because it just kind of occurred to me. You realize that, and tell me if this is wrong. I'm pretty sure it's right. The last two losses, Georgia and Oklahoma, I think the longest scoring drive against Alabama in either game is like 57 yards or 58 yards. Georgia did it this past weekend.
57 yards. Yes.
57. That's the longest scoring drive Alabama allowed in either game, both of which were losses. You've got to quit helping the other team beat you. That's what we were doing with those short fields, helping Oklahoma and Georgia beat us. Trust me, they don't need any help. These are teams that do not need the help. If you quit helping the other team and play your game on defense, you don't have to all of a sudden be the high-flying greatest show on turf offense. You just need to have what you had against Oklahoma, a relatively healthy offense, not beating itself. Just cut out the short field stuff. You're not going to have any success playing the teams you're going to be playing going forward if you're helping them.
And we've seen that, as you pointed out, a lot. And I definitely think it's put your team under pressure unnecessarily. And that's, if it's the offense with a turnover, put your defense at a disadvantage. If it's your special teams, put your defense at a disadvantage. But the offense also, it's putting itself at a disadvantage, because then when the defense allows points to be scored, now, you've got to respond to that. And now you're down. And it's like, especially against Oklahoma going in this game, what I will say is that I feel like Alabama is not going to be given much of a chance. Everybody will say, oh, it's going to be a close game. I fully expect it to be a close game. But watch. A lot of people at the end of the day, they're going to say Oklahoma when they make their pick. I just doubt that I would say it's probably going to be, and this is national media pundits. This is outside of the Bama market, because I think a lot of people are going to end up leaning Bama in this market. But when it comes, and don't listen to Oklahoma guys either, because they're obviously going to lean Oklahoma, but the national media pundits see what they're saying. And when they break down this game, see where they land. They'll talk about it being close and they could see it going either way, but they'll ultimately, 9 times out of 8
didn't want Alabama in the playoff. I bet Nicole Auerbach's going to pick Oklahoma.
Yeah, and
she didn't want Alabama in the playoff.
And that's a great point. And that's the other thing too. When it comes to these injuries and stuff, and this is something I wanted to mention earlier that I lost my train of thought. It's taking away the reason that Alabama fans get upset about Colt McCoy and him getting brought up is they feel like it diminishes what they did.
Yes.
Georgia on Saturday, when I bring up injuries on Twitter and I list them all out, I'm really more so saying for the playoffs, you might see a little bit better of an Alabama because they're getting all these guys back. That really didn't have anything to do with Saturday, but Georgia fans are going to take that. And they're going to say, no, we don't just like the fact that we beat Alabama. We love that we beat Alabama's ass, and we don't want you diminishing that whatsoever. That's BS. Stop making it, and this is why there's some hypocrisy here. When Alabama's on the other side of it, their fans, our fans, are willing to say, hey, don't make these excuses. We whipped y'all. They don't want anybody. But my point in saying that is it's understandable, and national people or people who don't have a dog in the fight love to see Alabama lose. So they don't want to see the beatings be diminished either. So it's understand that as an Alabama fan and just accept that you're not winning that battle, even though I've been trying to. Jimmy, I appreciate you taking the time to hop on here with me, brother. It's been a good conversation. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in. We're going to be covering I got a lot of mailbags coming up. You guys were fantastic. I asked for mailbag questions on Twitter. I got over 100 responses, and a lot of them probably going to be somewhat similar. I'll try to give credit to everybody as I group them, but I'm going to have to do multiple. So we got plenty of content coming in the next week. We're also going to be really breaking things down. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to talking to you again next week, Jimmy. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Get on over to rowback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order. Like this video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get wherever you listen to your podcast. Search the Cover Crimson Podcast Network. Follow, download, whatever that button is. Make sure to click that check and follow along. Set notifications on Twitter so you don't miss anything that we do. And once again, guys, I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys soon.